Hello, my crafty friend, and welcome to Ancient Egypt. My newest handmade journal is something I've been working on for quite a few months now, and I finally feel like it's complete. The theme I was going for is obviously Egyptology, but the aesthetic I was going for in this one is quite a bit different from my other junk journals that I've shared on this channel, which are, kind of filled with a lot of laces and embroidered trims and flowery things and beautiful things. This one, I wanted it to look a little bit more tattered and like it's being lived in and used and filled with observations that relate to perhaps travels. I kind of wanted it to feel like it's been on an expedition or an archaeological dig or two. And I was inspired by a journal artist named Tomo or Tumu. I'm not really sure. Sometimes she spells it Tomo and sometimes Toomoo. She's a really talented Japanese junk journal artist, and she made a really cool Egyptian journal that I watched the flip through for, where she had sewn on every paper and just left the sewing machine thread to hang out, and it gave it a really cool texture and reminded me kind of like the fraying of the fabric that may have wrapped an artifact or a mummy. So I kind of went for my take on that and left golden threads hanging out from a lot of the pages. Anyway, we'll get to all that. But yeah, instead of my typical flowery embroidered trim, I've gone for burlap. And instead of the really girly laces, I've gone for things that give me more of an Egyptian feeling. So I'm really excited about this one. I hope you love it too. I want to start by showing you the cover, of course, where we always begin with the journal. As cool as the layers on the front look, and as cool as what journal artists call the gator mouth, where it spreads open at the side because of how much stuff is stuffed into it, my favorite part of the cover is the spine. So I took some time and made a beautiful little Egyptian scarab out of turquoise. The scarab is pushing a sun disk made of carnelian and is on a field of lapis lazuli, the color of the midnight sky. So just imagine how cool this would look on a bookshelf. Lapis lazuli, turquoise, and carnelian are all semi-precious stones today, but were considered precious gems to the ancient Egyptians. I was inspired to use these gems based on my research into Egyptian jewelry and sacred Egyptian custom. So to the Egyptians, if you don't already know, the scarab represents rebirth and renewal. Every day, the scarab works hard to push a perfect little sphere, represented by this bead, a perfect little sphere of dung, and the Egyptians equated that to sort of a celestial figure or a celestial being pushing the sun disk, pushing the sun into view every morning at sunrise. And when night falls and everything becomes dark, we can always rely on the fact that the sun will rise again the next morning. So similarly in our lives, we have ups and downs, but we always get back up again. We might die, but we will always be reborn again. And as somebody who does lean quite east in my belief system, I tend towards the Vedic philosophies of reincarnation, the Hindu, Buddhist, Eastern ideals. I really love this as a symbol of rebirth and rejuvenation. So in modern day crystal healing terms, turquoise is a gemstone that resonates with the throat chakra. So it helps us to speak our truth, to put into words things that otherwise might be hard to articulate, to have a clear verbal flow. It helps us push past things like writer's block or fear of public speaking, great for people like me who do YouTube videos and we need to be able to think of what to say. Lapis lazuli is a third eye stone. So this is all about intuition, psychic awakenings, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, claircognizance, all the clairs, which means having clarity of knowing what exists to be known beyond what we're told. And then carnelian is a sacral chakra gem that is all about physical vitality, physical endurance, physical stamina. And so it kind of brings our psychic realm into our physical material realm to work with these stones together. I'm not sure how much of that was involved in the Egyptians' choice of using these stones, but I do believe these are kind of universal crystal energy tidbits of information today, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if the ancients also had that understanding. So getting to the rest of the cover, I did layered pockets using some really cool trim that I found at a local thrift store that had kind of a denim and burlap-y look that to me just looks Egyptian. In that pocket I've stuck a piece that I cut from an Egyptology textbook that looks really cool with all the hieroglyphs adorning a temple wall. The back also looks really cool with these birds. So instead of gluing it down on a piece of cardstock or something, I left it as it is so you can kind of choose which side to use. You can also take it out completely and leave your cover just as layers of fabric and layers of faux leather that I created by crinkling up some tissue paper and painting it in layers of indigo and blue and gold to give it kind of that ancient book feeling. And so I do kind of like how the cover looks just plain like this. But you know me, if you're one of my regular viewers, I always love to fill the pockets with goodies. So the upper pocket, which is bigger, I actually made a booklet for. So of course, it can also look like this if you choose to have maybe the Sphinx down here instead. So yeah, lots to play with. This little booklet is made out of 2 envelopes that I kind of sewed together and stuck together and decorated a little bit. This is actually a temporary tattoo that instead of tattooing it onto my skin, I tattooed it the same way you would, you know, you put the image side down, put water on it, put pressure on it, peel off the backing. I think it just looks so amazing on paper. I'm definitely going to use that idea again. That's something I came across. I don't remember whose flip through, but it was another journal artist I saw doing that when I was very new into junk journal making. So I bought a bunch of temporary tattoos and then forgot about them until I found them in my craft stash. And this one, again, it just looks Egyptian to me. So the fun thing about this is that you might want to do some journaling or documenting a trip or writing about whatever it might be, and you don't want to take a big, giant, heavy book with you. You can take just this little book and fill it up and then put it back. This is removable. So I took this medallion, which I found while thrifting for jewelry. The beads are just plastic, but look at how perfectly they go with that Egyptian color scheme. So that just stays in place, held on by another magnet that I made with a little snippet of Indian trim that had somewhat of an Egyptian look to it. So the inside of this envelope made mini book opens up to reveal some gorgeous wallpaper sample. This was in a wallpaper book that I picked up just a couple of weeks ago, really synchronistically. When wallpaper books, sample books are, you know, out of print, when they're no longer producing those wallpapers, the paint stores or wallpaper stores or interior designers who use them will typically just give them away if you're a crafter and you ask for them. So that's what I did. It was a really cool free find. This pattern to me just looks so Egyptian. I had to include it. This was also in that same wallpaper book, and then this backdrop is the wallpaper book. So the ibises with the kind of tropical looking palm leaves, also really Egyptian looking. And so there's layers of coffee dyed paper. This you could use as a little pocket or a tuck spot, the blue dyed paper. Now, if you're one of my regular viewers, you hear me point out a bluebird of happiness in every journal that I make. It was kind of a fun challenge to figure out how will I include a bluebird of happiness in an Egyptian themed book where it doesn't really fit. So there's a blue ibis of happiness in this one. It's the little fabric flip strip that folds out. Whenever there's like the back side of a wallpaper sample or something, that could be great. You can journal all down here, glue something to decorate it there, use it as like a backdrop for a collage. This is a pocket. I left it empty because it was starting to get very chunky, this journal, so there is some room for you to grow in it and add your stuff if you choose to buy it. And then on the back, I put just a little tuck spot. So there we go. 10 minutes in, 11 minutes in, we're finally ready to open the thing. So the closure, I took some sari trim, some faux silk sari trim. Oops, sorry for hitting the camera. And I sewed it onto this other beautiful trim, this kind of sequin trim. The color scheme being the colors of mummy wrappings, but a little bit more luxurious because there are gold strands. And there is a removable ankh pendant on this, so you could actually slip that off and wear it if you wanted to. Maybe pick out all the strings that got stuck in it. I don't know what the hieroglyphs say, I'm sorry, but I think it looked really cool. So inside the book, I've lined it with burlap to give it, again, that kind of expedition site feeling. And a lot of times when archaeologists make a discovery and find something they want to ship to a museum, they'll wrap it in burlap. So I kind of imagine that this whole book is a discovery and it's been wrapped in burlap and it's an exciting find. I did something kind of fun here, which is that the burlap peeks open to reveal the Sphinx, a little tiny view of the Sphinx. Otherwise it's glued down. I think this is the only embroidered sari trim in the entire book. To me, it has a very pharaonic, very Egyptian, very sandy feel to it with this kind of beige on black. So I used it as the pocket. The first piece of what I would call valuable ephemera in this book, maybe the only piece of, ephemera that has a value even beyond the book itself, is this one here. It's a genuine lithograph from the 1800s, printed in Germany, and it just shows a scene from one of the walls of an Egyptian pyramid. Really cool. So this is not a reproduction, this is an original lithograph. The yellowing, the staining on the paper, that's actual age. I didn't copy dye this, I didn't do anything to it, I just bought it and put it into the book. So originally I bought it for my own personal collection. I've got a few lithographs I've bought like this that are so old that you can scan them and copy them and use them because there's no longer a copyright. So basically anybody could reproduce this and sell the image, which makes it perfect to use in junk journals. But as a vegan, I really don't feel comfortable with the thought that perhaps they might be showing. I can't really tell if this cow is pulling that cart. I think maybe he is because the guy is holding reins. But if it has anything to do with animal sacrifice, I just don't really want to own it. If you don't either and you buy this book, let me know. I'll set it aside to include in something else one day, but I think this would be good journaling space to write your like introduction to the book, maybe your connection to Egypt if you feel a fascination for it like I do. This envelope is something that I printed from a printable shop called The Paper Cameo. She does really gorgeous work. And I filled it, I left it so you can open it all the way and journal on the other side. The thing I printed on the other side is just a really cool Persian carpet design that I actually found a photo of an antique carpet, blew it up, reduced the saturation, made it look really, really faint so it can be easily written or drawn over and just be kind of a nice neutral background. So yeah, that way it's an envelope, but you can also use it as journaling space to do some writing. And I stuffed it with printables that I found about the Egyptian gods. So Bast, Mat, Anubis, Montu, and Geb. So by no means is it all of them. It's not even most of them, but it's some of them. Those were designed by Style 49 Studios. I really love her mystical sort of printables. Okay, there's a lot to show, so I'm trying to go a little quickly. I clipped this little pouch in with just a binder clip that I attached a couple cute little onks to. Tried to keep it so everything in here has a nod to Egypt. I made this out of some pretty turquoise faux suede that I've used to sew together a little pouch that I cut out of brown faux leather. And then I dangled these really cool scarab charms. I love the way these things look. They were originally kind of a bright silver, but I think being in contact with whatever chemicals are in the faux leather has kind of given them a nice patina and a nice age. They look even better now with kind of blackened outlines in the details. And then the center drop that kind of holds the pouch shut has this gorgeous big piece of turquoise with an Eye of Horus. And I don't know if I pointed it out, but you probably saw I also attached 3 Eye of Horus charms to the front cover of the journal because I think they look so cool. So inside the little pouch is the miniest little journal in this book. I painted a scarab onto it with blue and black and gold. I just think it looks so cool. It's on coffee dyed paper, so you can write on that. The cover is coffee dyed cardstock, but inside there's coffee dyed paper and a little image that I ripped out from the book that I altered to create this book. And then in the back, there is a little sample of actual papyrus. This was just a scroll of blank papyrus that my grandparents brought back for me when they went to Egypt. When I tried to unroll the scroll to draw or paint on it, it just kind of crumbled into little pieces. So I've used a few of those little pieces throughout this book. Now I drew a blank cartouche onto it in gold pen, and when you purchase this book, if you purchase it, whoever purchases it, leave me a note at checkout and let me know what name you want in the cartouche, because I will look up the hieroglyphs for the letters in that name and I will draw those in for you, so you will have your name in a cartouche. And the history of that is that in ancient Egypt, the gods, the goddesses, the royals, their names were always recorded in a cartouche. It's like a sign of honor. So the book itself, okay, the front cover of this book, which is removable from the cover, by the way, it's this really cool fabric that my grandma gave me from her stash that I've sewn onto some coffee dyed cardstock. And then I coffee dyed this thrifted doily and stuck it down on the sides because the center looks a lot like a lotus bud. And the lotus is the national flower for Egypt. You'll see lotus motifs in a lot of Egyptian art. Since it's only glued down on the sides, you could actually use this as a tuck spot and put something here. So it can hold, you know, paper or a little booklet or whatever you want, maybe a postcard. But I actually love how it looks just like this. So I left it empty just as an aesthetic choice. But you can kind of put something in there if you want to. So yeah, I decided to leave the back of that blank just because it gives great writing space, writing or drawing. So my goal with the journals I make to sell is always that I want them to have a good blend of ephemera, of like cool stuff that you can play with if you're a paper lover like me, but also lots of space to actually write, because they're not junk lookbooks, they're junk journals. So this is a postcard that I made from finding like an old antique grungy postcard back. I printed that, and then I found this image in an Egyptian book, cut it out, glued the two together. So that it's a little bit bubbly, but that kind of gives to the, you know, feeds into the vintage vibe we're going for. Inked the edges to make it look older. And I went through my stamp stash and was so lucky that I actually found a vintage Egyptian stamp. So that's a stamp from Egypt. I think they used these for items that they would import or export. So yeah, that's a real Egyptian stamp on a newly made but old looking Egyptian postcard. I just did some layering to create this band with, you know, some coffee dyed fabric, coffee dyed paper, some of those golden thread remnants that I kind of like. Here's another little mini postcard that I made. It shows explorers pointing to the cool old monuments in the distance. And on the back, I reprinted, whoops, from an online library, I found an actual antique Egyptian postcard. So this is something that was actually sent as like a souvenir of Egypt. Let's see, stamped Cairo. I think it says 1903, but it's a little blurry. Not because of my printer, but the source image itself was blurry. So this is coffee dyed cardstock that I took some gold paint and just really roughly dabbed it on to add texture and shine. There's a little tuck spot here made from a clip out of some Egyptian design. This was a book page. I put some coffee dyed paper kind of attached to the edge so you can journal on it there and still have this beautiful image. A little tuck spot made from some rough burlap. I made a little journaling card that I put into it with a lotus image just kind of flat glued down to coffee dyed cardstock that I inked to make it look old. So yeah, this book has a lot of layers. Love this picture. This is also coffee dyed cardstock. I coffee dyed it, and then I took little bits of blue or purple cabbage and kind of dropped them over the dye. So it's like an eco dyed. I really love the way these blend and smear. It looks like ink blots or something, but it turned out really pretty for you to journal on. Belly band out of more coffee dyed paper. I tried to do a cool sewn border, but it only just kind of perforated the page and part of it tore off, so I decided to use it and not scrap it, kind of go with it anyway. And so I cut this beautiful bust out of an Egyptian book. I thought of gluing her down here because that would have looked really cool, but I couldn't glue her down because Nefertiti is on the other side. So it presents the challenge a lot of us crafters have when there's a beautiful image on both sides of a page, is like which do you use, which do you glue down? So that's your problem now. Or you can do as I've done and just keep it like this so you can kind of change back and forth between who you have visible in the book. A little pocket glued down onto some coffee dyed ledger paper where I've stuck some scraps, so extra coffee dyed paper. Here's a torn edge of some of this wallpaper from the wallpaper sample book. You can glue this onto a page like this and use it as a corner pocket or just right on the back of it. Sometimes people ask, like, what do people do with all the paper scraps that go into journals? You just play with them. So, beautiful image of Newt, the sky goddess. That coffee-dyed ledger, little text spots printed from the paper cameo, and then I added the eagle to it. This is a coffee-dyed paper that, okay, so for my other crafty, painty friends out there who are watching, when you paint and you go to wash the paint out of your paintbrush, bring a coffee-dyed piece of paper with you, and when you're running the water through the paintbrush to clean it, just let it land on the paper. That's how I got this, and it looks pretty neat. So pages, again, these are from the book that I altered to make the journal. So you could use this as a backdrop to, say, glue down postcards or photos, or you could gesso over the words and then use it like a journal page to write. There's a lot you can do with these. I tend to prefer the philosophies of people like Graham Hancock over like the, you know, academic approved Egyptologists. So I don't know how much stock I put into, you know, the approved of theories of Egypt. That's just kind of my nerdy, ancient civilization believing, Gaia watching self speaking here. So, I mean, if you want to read it, go for it. It could be interesting, but I just kind of included it to use as a backdrop in the journal. And this tiny little pocket is made out of a sewn cluster where I took some blue fabric and some coffee dyed paper and some vintage lace and just made a little cluster. So here's another strip of that genuine papyrus. It's pretty cool to touch it and feel it and imagine that for thousands of years this was the only thing used as paper, and that rolled up as a scroll was how people used books. Like it's kind of a fun thing to do. This is just from a roll of paper that would be fed into a player piano for that piano to read and play. A couple little mini pockets sewn on in coffee dyed paper, a cool diagram or architectural layout of a temple. I glued a few little details like this in just to add some color. A lotus, which again is the national flower for Egypt. Made that into a little tuck spot and put a sheet of paper that I coffee dyed using a stencil and coffee. And I coffee dyed this on a cookie sheet that was still hot and out of the oven that I had just baked something on. And that's why it kind of burned the design in a couple of places. I've been kind of experimenting over the last couple of years of how to achieve different effects with coffee dye and with different papers. That's another coffee dyed one where I put the coffee grounds onto the paper. Grounds or grinds? I always forget. I think coffee grinds. But anyway, that's why it got kind of a mottled look. Really cool temple entrance. It's plain coffee dyed paper. Another printable by the paper cameo. Maybe the only really girly page in the book. So if you're a guy and you buy this and you don't want it to look too girly, just use that as a base and glue some other paper on top. I love this little strip, the layering of that paper. Aren't they gorgeous? Plain an instrument. And yeah, I finished the edge here by gluing some coffee dyed paper down too. In two separate books, like this girl was in the original book that I've altered here, and then this little one was in an illustrated book of Egyptian symbols, and I thought it's kind of cool that very, very similar, some mirroring. Just stuck down a ripped piece of coffee dyed paper there. This I sewed down so it flips over, so you could do a lot of fun collaging here. You could do some secret journaling on the back of this envelope. This opens up so you can use all of this space to write something. You could tuck papers into here, whatever it might be. What I've tucked into it is this cool page that shows Isis and Osiris, double-sided, but with the same image on each side. So you could glue it down and you wouldn't be losing anything. Just a little cluster held on with a brad. This is removable, so you can either keep it in the book or take it out as you prefer. It's some coffee-dyed cardstock, and I found this image in a National Geographic that was about the Black Pharaohs. And yeah, this was a statue from Egypt. I adore this face and the earrings and everything. So it's a little bit brighter in color and photographic compared to a lot of the pages in the book that are more illustrative, but I just thought it looked really cool as a page. This pocket is made of really beautifully textured vintage lace. So I made another postcard. Tried to make it look old. You could actually mail these, but I think they just make really cool journaling cards. More coffee-dyed paper. This printable is by the Bohemian Bazaar collection in Medieval Mirage. That's another Persian carpet that I just kind of made into my own digital. Sewed on some brown lace. Another Medieval Mirage print. And that brings us to the center of the signature. So this little book is held in with brown lace. I sewed the book together using just waxed cotton and put more little onks on it. But just to show you how it looks removed, this can come out completely, and then this is your book cover. And so you could technically, if you wanted to, take all the stuff out and just use this as your junk journal, and then have this book cover. And you could put, say, a simple notebook into it. If you're not really into junk journals and collections of paper and like all the stuff spilling out of a big giant book, you could put like a small cahier or a small notebook and use these to tie it in and still have, you know, the cool Egyptian cover, if I do say so myself, but with a more simple book, if you're that kind of a journaler where you want a simple book to write in. So yeah, you could kind of do what you want with it. It also means if you fill up this junk journal with your writings and you still want to use the cover for your next journaling, you can, yeah, just keep kind of changing out the inside books as you go. Okay, I'll try to go a little bit faster now since we're past the middle point, so you'll just be seeing the other side of a lot of the pages. Some beaded sari trim with some coffee-dyed packing paper that has just a cool crinkly texture. Just a random fabric strip. A belly band out of dark blue fabric, so I just tucked this image into it. The other side I just left plain. So this page I kind of had some fun with. I made a removable pocket. So I just took a print that I made of another Persian carpet, sewed it down so that there's a pocket on this side and a pocket on that side, and just put some little random papery bits into it. But yeah, it looks kind of cool because you can tuck that over the side of any page and have an instant pocket without having to glue anything down on the paper. And I just glued some little elements down to add color and movement. This one's fun because on one side the feather is green and red, and on the other side it's blue and red, so you can kind of see both sides. Coffee-dyed paper. I love this scene. This might just be my favorite image in the book. print too. Another bigger bit of that real papyrus. And you know that papyrus came from Egypt because it wasn't purchased online. Like, my grandparents actually bought it from a vendor in Egypt. So it's also cool because it supports the local craftspeople who still make papyrus pages in the ancient methods. Tuck spot. I also made a little tuck spot by folding over that piano paper and putting yet another, see what I mean about how it kind of broke into bits when I tried to unravel the scroll. They gave me 2 sheets of that papyrus, so I'm thinking with the second sheet, instead of trying to like unroll it while it's dry and hard, I might soak it in some water and then unroll it while it's wet, and then maybe like put something heavy over top of it. That way, hopefully it won't break. I love how this turned out. This is also stenciled, coffee dyed dot grid paper, and it made just the perfect pocket to go on this coffee dyed ledger. I cut this out from an Egyptology book. Really cool treasure chest. And the edges would be perfect for journaling. So you could glue that down somewhere. Or again, just keep it as it is. So the other side of this paper, my sewing machine went a little bit nuts when I glued this pocket down. But I kind of like how all these rough strings look sticking out. So where the strings are all knotted, they're hidden under that coffee dyed paper. Now you know my little secret. When sewing goes wrong, just glue something over it. Anyway, okay, so this is one of my favorite little things in here. It's an envelope made out of fabric. I got the idea for this from a junk journaler on YouTube named Heidi McGregor. And she does the cutest little fabric envelopes. So I made my variation of that using this Egyptian looking or like old woven looking fabric. I fussy cut this from a piece of embroidered Indian fabric just because the colors kind of match that Egyptian vibe. And then I filled it with a little collection of prints that I found from the Egyptian book. So I cut these out and backed them on kind of a postcard back, but that shows you all the Egyptian hieroglyphs and their corresponding letters in our alphabet. So it's pretty cool. If you want to write a secret message in hieroglyphs, you could do it. The legend is on the backs of each of these. So yeah, each of these little postcards is backed with that same really cool hieroglyph alphabet. And yeah, I chose to find just the black and white illustrations for these because I thought it made a cool little set. So yeah, I think they turned out looking pretty cool. And put these dancers and musicians in the front. I think that's my favorite of these images. So yeah, they just fit perfectly into this little hand-sewn fabric envelope and sit in there. This statue with the cool hieroglyphs. More coffee dyed blue paper, more of that cabbage coffee dyed paper. This page has kind of a pocket made out of a little bit of burlap. And then this is maybe my favorite pull-out page in the book because it shows the designs for all kinds of Egyptian jewelry. So the pectorals, oh, just look at that ring, the bracelet, the scarab broad collar, all the little amulets. As a jewelry maker, oh yeah, and it's the same thing on both sides. So as a jewelry maker and jewelry collector and somebody who loves putting jewelry in all of my journals, I just adore pictures of ancient jewelry. I think it's so cool to know that ancient peoples adorned themselves and had mystical values associated to stones. And in honor of all the lapis lazuli that they used, the bookmark holding this in, or sorry, the paper clip holding it in, has a detachable, huge, genuine lapis lazuli pendant that I made. So it's heavy. This is a large, I think it's a 20 millimeter or 30 millimeter bead. I'd have to measure that to be certain, but I think it looks really cool. And you can actually wear that as jewelry. The other side, see what I mean about my sewing machine went crazy? It doesn't really like sewing through paper, but I make it anyway. So there's the other side of that page with the gold. This is coffee dyed graph paper, but the lines kind of disappeared when I coffee dyed it. This is one of my favorite fabrics of all time. My grandma gave me a bunch of this from her stash, and I just turned it into a flip. So you've got all this journaling space hidden under that pretty fabric. The colors are kind of Egyptian, but also I felt like the flowers look similar to the Egyptian lotus. That tiny little paper. And that's the back page. So that brings us to the end. So yeah, on the back of this, I just put a strip of embroidered sari fabric, sari trim that has, again, kind of like a lotus bud looking motif. Some sequined fabric that kind of reminds me of pyramids. I put just a printed page in the back there. So that design's a little girly, but it's so pretty. I have to put a little bit of pretty stuff in a journal, right? But you could glue other paper down onto that like a background and use it. And then you've got all of this space for writing. This design was also from Medieval Mirage. And I love it because it looks kind of like, again, like little jewelry elements in the design. So that's it. And then in the very back page, I tucked in book pages from a book on Egyptology that I didn't want to cut them up and collage them because they're large, but they kind of have to be cut. So I love how this page looks like it's painted on papyrus, this map of ancient Egypt. And then inside, it has just this gorgeous temple with all the treasures. Like, just imagine finding these treasures, the vases and the reliefs and everything. It's just so richly painted and beautiful. And then that design looks really cool too, from a temple wall. And then there's also a little image hidden under the burlap here. So I like having little surprise things to discover in the journals. So in the back pocket, because of course these are pockets here and here too, I put just a really nice piece of coffee dyed handmade paper. This is handmade cotton paper, so it feels so soft. It has actual little flower petals pressed down into it. For some reason, when I coffee dyed it, the coffee didn't soak all the way through, so it's kind of clean and white on the inside, but it has a cool desert sand look on the outside, which is why I felt it matches this theme. And then the last little thing that I hid in here is just the title of the book, A Journey to Ancient Egypt, my name in a cartouche, my signature, and the date that I made it. Blank on the other side, so you could journal on it. You don't need to keep it. I don't glue those things in, but I feel like if somebody is a handmade book collector, they might like the book to be, you know, signed by the artist. And there we have it. I kind of like the Sphinx peeking up from the bottom. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little journey to ancient Egypt book flip through. As of the time that I publish this on YouTube, I will list it in my Etsy shop. So it will be available for $333.33 Canadian. So that's a bargain if you're American. But these tend to be selling kind of quickly, so I don't know how long it'll last. Oh, and if you've been admiring this ring, which is really cool, kind of turquoise and indigo enamel on a gold base with a stunning faux sapphire and little crown of faux diamonds. This is the ring that you get as your gift with the journal. I've challenged myself to find rings when I go antiquing and thrifting that match the journals that I'm working on. So whatever ring I wear in the flip through other than my personal rings is like the gift with purchase. So yeah, I love how this one has more of a modern, it's not really ancient Egyptian because they didn't set diamonds and precious cut stones like that in gold, but the color scheme looks really Egyptian, and it definitely looks like the kind of fine jewelry you'd find in an Egyptian market today. It's a large ring. It's a little bit loose even on my index finger, but I hope you love it. I hope you had fun. And if you buy the book, I hope it brings you as much enthusiasm to fill it up as it brought me to make it. Thank you so much for watching. So much love, and we'll see you next week.